Hello, in this video we'll see the file structure of a Liquid theme, also known as the theme architecture. When building a Shopify theme with Liquid, we must follow a specific structure, otherwise Shopify won't be able to know where to find the different types of files the theme needs to function. Before getting started, if you're not familiar with Liquid, I have a Liquid in-depth tutorial where I cover everything you need to know to better understand this video. I'll be linking that in the video description and somewhere around the top as well. So, here locally I have cloned Dawn, Shopify's open source theme, and the first thing you'll notice is that we have these assets, config, layout, locales, sections, snippets, and template directories. As of the time of recording this video, these are the only supported directories by Liquid themes, so anything else will simply be ignored. The exception here is this shopify.theme.toml file, which is used by Shopify CLI. It is an optional file, but here you can specify the different type of environments your store or your setup has. In this case, I have a single environment, development, with a development store here. So when I run the development command, it points to this store directly. Anyways, now let's explore these directories. Now, something we should keep in mind before starting is that these directories, if you open any of these, you'll see that there are no subfolders. Instead, there are a lot of files at the top level, so this is a flat file structure. And the reason for this is because of a limitation when creating themes with Liquid. See, if we try to create here a subfolder, say for example CSS, and I drag these few files over here, when I run Shopify theme dev past the development environment, you'll see that we'll get an error, and that is because themes with Liquid don't support having subdirectories inside these parent directories. Over here, you'll see here this error, and it says that this CSS folder in the directory structure isn't supported. And the way to fix this is to take these files and put them back at the topmost level and delete this directory. Now, if I run the command again, you'll see in a moment that we don't get this error. So if you want to group things, one way to do it is to prefix them. So for example, here you'll see all of these components CSS is prefixed with the word component. That way, if you're looking for the CSS of a component, you'll know in which part of this large flat directory to look at. It's not ideal, but it's what we have to work with at the moment. If I now view the store, you see here that everything is working fine. Now, the first directory that we'll see is the Snippets Directory, this one over here. If you have already used other template engines, you may also know this as the Partials Directory, and this is basically for pieces of code in Liquid that we want to reuse across the page or that deserve their own file because of how complex they are. We'll see examples of both in a moment. So let's first learn how to create a snippet. Here, let's say my snippet.liquid, and here I can say this is coming from a snippet. Now here in theme.liquid, which is the file that controls the main structure of the page, I will just call render my snippet. If I save this, I see here this is coming from a snippet. Now, you may also see, if you're using a legacy theme, the word include here. This is deprecated, but it achieves roughly the same. So here we still see the snippet, but here we have a warning, include is deprecated, convert it to render. So for different reasons, which I'll link in the video description below, Shopify has an article about why using render is preferred over include. And yeah, basically use render whenever possible. Now, let's learn how to pass parameters to a snippet because they do receive parameters. Here, let's say word, let's say hello. And if I save this, and from my snippet, I say the word is, let's say word. If I save this, I see the word is hello. I can also pass multiple parameters. For example, the word is hello, and the second word is second word. If I don't pass anything here, this won't error out, it will simply show nothing. But then I can here separate it by comma as second word, word 2. I save this, and I see here the second word is word 2. Now, something you may want to consider when creating a snippet is to add documentation at the top, because as you see here, there is no completion, no typings, no nothing. So if someone is starting to use a code base and they are not familiar with what the snippets expect, they will have to go through the code of the entire snippet to figure that out. And as you'll see in a moment, that code can get pretty lengthy. So let's see an example of how the documentation of that looks like. So for example, let's go to facets.liquid here, and you see this comment at the top, which says in a short sentence what this snippet is doing, what parameters it accepts, and then how you will normally use this. So render facets and the parameters that you should pass to it. Now let's replicate this in my snippet.liquid. So let's say comment and comment, and let's say that this renders a first word and a second word. It accepts word, which is a string. Let's say that this is the first word, and second word, which is also a string, and this is the second word. And here we say usage, render my snippet, and then we say word, or word variable to name it something differently, and then second word variable. This won't make any difference at the moment of rendering this snippet, but it will certainly do at the moment of maintaining this code base and introducing new developers to it. Now let's say that you wanted to see where a snippet is being used. You can get that by doing a global search for render and the name of your snippet. So for example, render facets, and here we can see that it is used in 2 places. This one in facets.liquid is the example of the usage in the documentation, so this one doesn't count. But then we have this in main search.liquid, and then we have this other one in main collection product grade.liquid. Now let's see an example of a snippet that, even though it's being used only once across the whole page, it deserves its own file because of how complex it is. So if I look for header drawer here, it is only used in the header. This example over here is from the documentation of the snippet itself, and you can see that this is a pretty lengthy component. So let me close this over here so we have more space to see here. This is a pretty lengthy component, so even though we could have added this directly in header over here, this section, we'll see what a section is in a moment, but this file is already pretty long. So imagine that you also added these 300 lines over here. This file will be just too large to manage. So this is a good example of where it is a good idea to separate a piece of code into a snippet, even though we are only using it in a single place. Now let's see the assets directory. In this directory, you will put any file you might need to get the URL for in your theme. So for example, the most common thing to put here, as you can see, are script tags and CSS files, but you can put any type of file here. Like for example, here we have an image. You could also put videos, text files, basically anything that you will need for your theme to work properly. So let's see how we can get a file from here. So let's say that I wanted to get a script tag, a script file from here. Let's create one. Let's say my snippet script.js, and let's here have an alert that says hello from my snippet script. If I save this and I go to the page here, I don't see this alert yet because I haven't included this snippet, this JavaScript file, sorry. And the way of doing this is by saying my snippet script.js, so basically the exact name of the file here, and then we use the filter asset URL. for this to not throw any error, then we put the async attribute here. I could have also used defer, but anyways, if I come here, I see now hello from my snippet script. So this is working fine. Now let's delete this and let me show you another example of how to get files from the asset directory, because if you're trying to get an image, which honestly is not that common, as normally you will manage images from Shopify's admin instead, but in case you have to get one from the assets directory, there is a special filter for that. So let's say a snowboard image.jpg, and here we pass the asset image URL. Now for this to not throw any error or do not mark any errors here, let's pass loading eager. Let's give it a width of 500, a height of 500, and if I save this, I'll see here the image, but it looks blurry, and this is why we are using this filter instead, because now we can pass as a parameter the dimensions of the image we want to get. Let's say that I wanted to get a 1000 by 1000 image. If I save, now the image doesn't look blurry. Of course, here you will have to put a number that makes sense. If the actual size of your image is like 50 by 50, even though you specify here 1000 by 1000, you won't get a file of these dimensions, because the original file that you have here in the assets directory isn't that size. So keep that in mind. By the way, this image over here, I use loading eager because it is above the fold, so it is visible as soon as the user visits the page. But if it was below the fold, so let's say that the user had to scroll a bit to see it, you should use instead loading lazy to make it load when the user is scrolling nearby. The next one we'll see is the layout directory over here. So this file is where we have the base structure of the theme. Each page can use a different layout. This is why in this file over here you see theme.liquid, which is the default layout that will be used unless you specify otherwise. And then, for example, here we have password.liquid. We haven't seen yet templates, but let's say that I go to password.json. This is a JSON template, and here in this property over here is where you will specify the layout that you want to use. This property is optional, so if you don't define it, it will pick theme.liquid as the layout. Now here, as you can see, this is where you will add everything that is sort of global in the page, like for example the meta tags in the head, the language of the site, which you can get from this variable, any global class that you may want to add, SEO tags, third-party JavaScript, global CSS variables, and anything else that you may consider worthy of putting here. Also, if you render a snippet or anything else here, it will show in any page. So this is a good place to put the header and the footer. And also, as we have been seeing throughout this series of tutorials, I can put here any arbitrary snippet, like for example my snippet, and it will render in the home page and across any other page. So if I start navigating here, you can see that this doesn't change at all. Now there are two important things that we should take into consideration in a layout file. These are, the first one is content for layout. This is a special variable that is available to us in any layout file, and this is what controls where the content of the page will render. You will normally put this inside the main tag, but let's say that I wanted to put this above my snippet. So the content of the page will show above my snippet. You can see right now that it is shown below it. If I save this, now the content of the page here is the first thing that we see, and then we see my snippet. However, you can see that the header and the footer both show below my snippet still, and this is because those are not controlled by content for layout, but those are instead sections. We haven't seen sections yet, but these are basically these two lines: section, header group, and footer group. If I move them, for example, if I cut this and put it here, and cut this and put it here, if I save, now I can see the page exactly as it was before, but with the difference that now my snippet is showing as the last thing and the entire page is showing above of it. Now let's revert things back to how they were. And let's see now content for header. Content for header is important because this is where third-party apps inject their JavaScript. And once you discover this, in an attempt for improving the performance of your site, you might be tempted to start parsing this variable and start replacing or removing things through liquid filters. And even though that might look fine at a first glance, if you check Shopify's documentation, they advise against that. So here in the documentation for content for header, you see that you shouldn't try to modify or parse content for header because the contents are subject to change. We can change the behavior of your code. So basically at any point, Shopify can change the structure of this variable without notifying you ahead of time. Therefore, you shouldn't really be relying on how it is structured now because tomorrow it might be different. I also mentioned this because a common limitation of Liquid themes is that at the time of recording, they cannot access query parameters or arbitrary query parameters. So you might face this issue and try to Google it, and you may end up in this gist over here of how to get a query parameter. And even though this code over here might work, you can see here that it is relying on content for header, and it is parsing it in a very hacky way. And that might work today, but tomorrow that's not necessarily going to be the case. So if you're going to use things like this, be aware that Shopify does not recommend them. Something else I want to cover for the layout directory is checkout.liquid, which is not present in every theme. For example, Dawn doesn't have it over here, although you could create it inside the layout directory. And this is basically a layout for the checkout page. It is only available for Shopify Plus stores, and that's why you don't see it in every theme, because Dawn is a general purpose theme. But if you are using it in a Shopify Plus store, then you can create this file, and this is how it will look like by default. So you create it and you will copy this, and then you will start making the modifications you need to. However, there is a caveat, and it's that checkout.liquid is getting deprecated. So here you can read more about it, but eventually in between 2024 and this date in 2025, it will get deprecated in favor of checkout extensibility, checkout UI extensions, and Shopify functions. So if you are working on a theme that already has this created, then you can keep working on it until this date. But if you want to do modifications to the checkout page, I would not suggest you go with the checkout.liquid route. Now let's see one of the most important parts of a Liquid theme, sections. This deserves a video of their own, which will be the next one, but let's quickly introduce them and see what they enable us to do. Sections are Liquid files that allow us to create reusable modules of content that can be customized by merchants. What this means is that in Liquid we will only create the HTML structure, but the content itself will be added by the merchant. They can be as customizable as you need them to be. And let's see an example. So here I'm going to look for image banner, and this is the Liquid file that controls this section. Now, how does this section look like? Here in the theme editor, which I opened by clicking over here, customize your theme at the theme editor. When you run a theme with Shopify CLI, you will get this link over here. You can click it and click on open there, and that will open this URL over here with your theme editor for your local theme. Anyways, all of these things over here are the different sections that we have, and we can add one by clicking on add section over here, and these are all the sections that come by default with Dawn. Now let's see image banner over here, which is the section for this file, and here you can see that we have a number of settings, and I can start changing things here and they will be reflected over here. So for example, let's change the first image to this background over here. If I change this and I save it, now the background of this section is this image instead of the default image that was here before. I can also change the text, for example, by clicking on this sub-elements over here, which are called blocks. And for example, let's change this to my image banner. And if I save this, you can see that the text updates in real time, and we have now a different text. I can add also other blocks, like for example, a text block. It comes here with some default text, but I can of course change it to anything else, or even format this text. For example, let's put this in bold, and I see here that this text is in bold here, and it is also in bold over here. And I can reorder this as I please. For example, let's make this the second element, and this is what we have. I can hit save here, and yep, that's how it goes. We have plenty of settings here, and now let's see where these settings are coming from. Now let's see where those settings come from. So in the image banner.liquid file, we scroll down until we see a schema here. This is a special tag that is used in section files, so you can only use this in liquid files inside the sections directory. And this is basically a long JSON that controls how the section behaves. So let's start going through the properties here. The first one we have is name. This is the name of the section, and here we are using this T syntax. This T stands for translate, and this is because Dawn is a theme that supports multiple languages. So instead of hard coding the name of the section here, we can have a different name depending on the language that the merchant has chosen for their store. So if I look for image banner over here, we can see in this locales directory, the locales directory, we'll see it in a moment, but this is basically the directory where all the translations are stored. And you can see that each one of these languages has the image banner key. And if we click on any of these, we can see the name key over here, same one as here. And this is what will show for this language in the name of the image banner section. This is what will show for Portuguese, for example. And we can search the one for English, which is the default, as the name of this schema specifies. And we can see here image banner. Now, if you're building a theme of your own for personal usage or for usage in a store that you're working on, you don't really have to use this translate syntax if you don't want to, because you better than anyone know what language the merchant will be using for their store. So if you wanted to use English here, so for example, say image banner, this is completely valid too. Just keep in mind that if someone who doesn't speak English sees this theme and they have Shopify in French, as this is a hard-coded string, they will still see here image banner instead of a string translated to their own language. Now, tag is the HTML tag that will wrap this section. In this case, we are wrapping it in a section HTML tag. And then we have class. This is the class that will be added to that section tag, which is also section, but you can put anything else over here. Now, this disabled on, here we have groups. This is because we haven't seen section groups yet, but basically we have a group for the header and for the footer. And we don't want the image banner to show in any of them because it wouldn't make sense to have an image banner in the header or in the footer. Now we have the settings, and this array over here is what controls all of these settings that we have over here. The properties that each setting receives depends on the type of setting that we are dealing with. For example, in the case of image picker here, we are only passing it this ID and label properties aside from the type one. This is like the minimum structure that you will need for a type of setting, but some other type of settings require more than this. So for example, this range one over here, you see that it has type, ID, and label, but it also has a min, a max, a step, unit, and a default one. This step one, this range one over here, sorry, is this range input over here that we have. So here we are specifying a step of 10, and this is why when I drag this over here, it is increasing and decreasing in steps of 10. Likewise, I see that the minimum is 0 and the maximum is 100, and that is controlled by that part of the settings too. Now, how do we know what properties each type of setting receives? and more importantly, what type of settings we have available. Well, we have a pretty extensive documentation page over here with all the available type of settings. So for example, if we check range over here, we can see that it receives the standard attributes, which are type, ID, label, default, and info. And on top of that, it receives min, max, step, and unit. And here it tells you whether those are required or not. The standard attributes also are not all of them required. Type, ID, and label, as I mentioned, are the minimum that you will need for any type of settings, but you can also pass a default and an info, which are optional in both cases. I'll be leaving a link to this page in the video description, but also later in the video, I'll be creating an example section so you can get an idea of what the process will be like, and also how to do things like accessing the settings and things like that. Also, the next video will be a more in-depth tutorial on how to create sections, because as you can see here, there is plenty to cover. Now let's continue seeing the properties of sections. So now that we saw settings, we have blocks over here. Blocks are a way of having content within a section that can be repeated multiple times. So if you have like a group of settings that you will have repeated over and over again, instead of creating the setting multiple times, you can create a block and then let the merchant add it as many times as they need to. Also, you can use it for content that needs to be reordered, but that you don't really need it to be repeated. In that case, you will use the limit property over here. So for example, for the heading, we want to give the merchant the ability to put them in any order that they want to, but we don't want to give the merchant the ability to add more than one heading, because it wouldn't make much sense. And this is how that will look like. So here we have the heading, the name of the blog appears over here, by the way. We have then text, and we have buttons over here. We cannot add more blocks because all of them have this limit to 1. So heading has limit to 1, text has a limit of 1, and buttons has a limit of 1. But what I can do is reorder them as I please. If I were to remove this limit 1 property and I save over here, then if I refresh the theme editor, I'll see in a moment that now I can add multiple headings. So let's say my heading 2, and I can place it in any order that I want to. However, where having multiple blocks make more sense is in places like, for example, a collapsible content over here, which can be used, for example, for an FAQ section. You can have as many questions, frequently asked questions, as needed, so you can't really predict how many a merchant would like to add. Therefore, having each one of these items, each one of these rows as a block makes a lot more sense than creating them as a fixed setting. Now let's create a simple section to see how to put all of this together from scratch. So here I'm going to create a section to showcase a group of promotions. So let's call this promotions group.liquid. Make sure to create it inside the sections folder if you are following along. And now let's add the section schema. So I'm going to create this schema and then schema tags, and then let's start building this JSON here. So the name of the section will be promotions group. We can wrap this in a tag of section, although this is optional. We can also give it a class to the wrapper element. Let's say my wrapper class. And now let's start writing the settings. So the first thing we want to create is a setting for the title of the section to showcase it. And here from the input settings documentation, we want to have here a text. So I'm going to create an object inside the settings array. The type will be text. The label, let's call this title. And the ID will be title. If I save this, let's see if our section shows. So here, if I refresh the page, I'm not going to save the previous settings. And if I refresh the page and I try adding a section, let's see, the name we gave this was promotions group. So here, if I look for promotions group, we'll see here that we have no results. And this is because we also have to add a presets array here with an object, at least one object with at least the name key, and this is what determines whether it shows here or not. So let's give this the name of promotions group. If I save this and now I refresh the page, I can try adding a section, and now let's see, promotions group, I get the promotions group, although I added it to the footer. Let's add it here to the template instead, promotions group, and there we go, we have it, although nothing is showing, but the title setting that we have this one. So let's fill this with promotion 1 and let's save it. And we don't see anything yet because we need to get the value that we got that we had here. So let's say h1, or better yet h2, section dot settings dot title. Basically, this section dot settings part will always be the same for any setting you have, but this title here should match this ID here. So if I save this and then I refresh the page, now I see here promotion 1, and as I type here, we see that this updates in real time. Now let's say we want to create a setting to let the merchant say whether they want this left aligned, center aligned, or right aligned. Let's start creating this setting to give them that option. So the type here doesn't make sense to be a text field. There are better types for this. We'll go to the documentation in a moment. The label will be title alignment, and the ID will be title alignment. Now, for the type here in the documentation, even though we could use a text field, we don't want to give the merchant an empty text field so they can start typing anything there, because that is error prone. Instead, we want to constrain their options to something like this, like a select. This segmented control actually makes a lot of sense. Here we could have left, center, or right. But if we had more than 5 options, we could have a drop down like this one instead. Anyways, let's make the type here a select, and let's see what properties we have to add here. So we have to add options. Options is an array. Let's see if we have the structure here. Here we have an example, so value and label, and we also have to provide a default in this case. So value will be left, and the label will be left as well. This one will be center, and the label will be center. And this one will be right, and the label will also be right. And now when we get this value, let's say a style text align, we can say section dot settings dot title alignment, and let's here provide a default. So the default will be left. It must match one of the values inside this array, or else we'll get an error. So if I come here and I refresh, we have here or setting for the title alignment. And now if I say center, we get this aligned to the center, and if I say right, we get this aligned to the right, because it is passing this value, the value we select, to this inline style over here. And now let's add a block that will be a promotion. So after the settings object, we can have here blocks. By the way, this is optional. If your section doesn't have blocks, you don't have to put this blocks property at all. Now let's put the type here as a promotion. Types for blocks are arbitrary, so you can put any type in here. You don't have to use a type from input settings. Now we also have to give this a name, in this case promotion, and each promotion has settings, and this settings property expects the exact same type of structure as this settings property, so an array of objects where each object is a setting from this list over here. Now let's say that a promotion has two things. It will have a title as well, so ID title, and it will have an image. So let's say the type will be image picker, this one over here. This doesn't need more properties other than type, ID, and label, so this is what we'll use. Type image picker, ID image, and the label will be image. Now if I save this and I go here and let me center this and let me save first, you may get this error. You can just refresh the page and it'll get fixed. There we go. So come here, I'll center this and save. Now we have no errors. And now let's add a promotion. So my promotion, for example, and let's select an image. I can select this one and I can save. And as this is a block, I can add as many of these as I need. So my promotion 2, and let's select another image such as this one. Now none of these are showing, and the reason for this is because we haven't accessed them through the code yet. So to access the blocks, we do here a for loop. So for block in section.blocks, and now let's say if block.type equals, and here is where we'll use this type, so promotion. Then here we will do whatever we need to do with a block of type promotion. So in this case, let's create an h3 here, block.settings.title. Note that this is not the same as section.settings.title. This is why I was able to use an ID of title here for the block settings, and then here for the section settings. Section.settings.title is the title of the section itself. Meanwhile, this title over here, block.settings.title, is the title of each particular block. So if I save this and I refresh the page, I'm seeing now my promotion and my promotion 2, the exact same ones that I have here. And how do I display the image now? Well, I can do block.settings.image, I think was the ID that I gave to this. Yes. I can say image URL. Let's give this a width of 500, and then let's pass this to the image tag. Let's save it, and if I refresh the page, I get my images here. Lastly, if we wanted to give this some styling, I can take this and wrap it in a div, for example. And let's say that here we wanted to have a style, display, flex, justify, content, center, and let's give this a gap of 20 pixels, for example. And then we can also wrap this in another div and give this a style of display, flex, flex direction, column, and a gap of 10 pixels. I'm using inline style here for simplicity, but you could be using a class name and then a CSS file as well. And if I refresh this, we should be getting something that looks a bit nicer. Yes, I should be giving a text align here, center, so text align, center, and there we go. We have a section that looks quite decent for how quickly we were able to create it. Now, before moving to the next folder, let's see where the data for the sections we changed in the homepage lives. So the data for any section lives in the template file associated to it, if it is a JSON template. In this case, the template associated to the homepage is this index.json by default. Here we can see the image banner we have at the top. Then we have a feature collection block, which we'll see over here. This type will match the exact file name of the section. So if we look for featured collection.liquid, we'll see this in the sections folder. However, we don't see promotions group being used here. And the reason for this is because we haven't seen the changes that we have in the online editor with what we have locally here. So to do this, let me open another console, and now we'll run here Shopify theme pool. I'll pass the D flag of development, and then I'll pass the development environment. This will take a moment to sync, but once it does, this JSON will be updated with the content that I have here in the online editor. Now this finished syncing and we have it locally, and you can see here the changes we made to image banner, and most importantly here at the bottom we have this promotions group, which is the section we added a moment ago for my promotion. The type here has to match the exact name of the file in the sections directory here, promotions group, for example, for the one that we just created. And then over here we have the data, so my promotion to, my promotion, and then here are the settings for the section itself, the title, the title alignment, and these are the settings for each one of these blocks. This image over here is some sort of internal URL that Shopify uses to identify each one of the images we have uploaded or have used. We'll go more in depth in what this file is doing in a moment when we are checking the templates directory, which is next. But I wanted to mention this because if you are working with multiple people in the same store, you should know that the content of the sections is kept in the theme itself, so you may accidentally end up overriding each other's changes. Therefore, having some sort of version control might be useful. In a previous video, in these Liquid tutorials, I show you how to connect a Liquid theme with GitHub and integrate that with Shopify. If you're interested in that, that will help mitigate the cases where you end up overriding somebody else's changes. I'll link that video in the video description, and it should appear at the top as well. Now let's see templates. Templates control what's rendered on each type of page in the theme. Each page in the theme has an associated template, but a single template can be associated to multiple pages. There are different types of templates, and this is an exhaustive list of them which I'll leave in the video description. Not all of them are required, so if there is a feature you don't need in your store, you don't have to create a template for it. For example, if you're not using the gift card feature in your store, then you don't need to create the gift card template, as it won't be used. Despite there being multiple types of templates, most of them are roughly the same at the moment of creating them. Some of the most important ones are the page one, the product template, and the collection templates, as it is fairly common to create multiple of these templates per store. For example, if you have an About Us page and a Contact page, both of them are pages, thus they fall into the page template. But it's unlikely that you'll want the same content to show in both of these pages, so you'll have a Contact page template and then an About Us page template. Templates can either be a JSON file or a liquid file. First, let's cover JSON templates. So for this, let's use index.json over here, which is the template that is used for the home page. As you can see over here, renders the home page of the store. So we were using this template a moment ago. This is where we added the promotions group section, which we can see over here. And now let's quickly check the structure of this template, because even though the online editor has a way of generating them, it is useful to understand what structure this template has, because there are instances where you will want to edit this yourself manually. For example, when debugging or when working locally, as it is quicker to change a string here than to go to the online editor, find the section you want to edit, and change the content over there. In both cases, the change will be made in this JSON file, but changing it manually here is faster. So let's open this promotions group here to the side, as this will help us better illustrate the content over here. And let's start here at the top. So we have this sections key in this JSON, and then we have all of the sections that are in the page. So we have image banner, feature collection, and then this long ID over here. The sections that have this long ID are the ones that are added through the online editor, because Shopify generates an ID for them. But if you were adding an ID as a section manually in this JSON file, which you can do, you can use a human readable name, like for example this image banner, which was added when the DOM theme was being created. Then over here you have the type of the section. This type will match the name of the section file. For example, if we check this one over here, the type is promotions group. Therefore, we know that it is a promotions group section. Then over here we have settings, blocks, and blocks order. This doesn't necessarily have to be in this order, because JSON doesn't require things to be ordered in a specific way. This is why we use this block order property over here, because no matter what order things appear here, they can, according to the JSON spec, they don't necessarily have to be ordered this way. Anyways, let's start with the settings property over here. The title property is this one. So this is just a key value pair. We have the ID of each one of these settings and then their value, assuming they are defined, because if I were to not specify a title over here, then this doesn't have to show, or it could show blank. Both of those ways are valid. Anyways, we have title over here, and then title alignment, which has center all in lowercase, because it is showing this value over here and not the label. The label is just for the merchant to see. Then we have the blocks. We have here the type of block, which will match this over here, and then the settings of the block, which follows a very similar structure to what we just saw. So a key value pair of this ID and then its value. So we have the title here and its value, and then the image and its value. You can see here that this is not an actual image, but some sort of internal Shopify ID to reference this image. If you were editing this JSON manually, you will not be able to generate this yourself. So in the case of images, you will have to add them through the online editor, unless you know the ID of the image ahead of time. And as we saw earlier in the video, but I want to surface this again, we can also specify a layout property over here, which will tell this template which one of the layouts in this folder to use. If this property is not specified, then it will pick theme.liquid by default, but we can specify any other file in this directory by putting its name over here. So as the layout password was put here, we are using this layout instead of this one. Now let's see how to create a JSON template. Let's say that we wanted to create one for the About Us page. So I could do page about us.json, and I can start adding content over here based on what we have in index.json. So for example, starting with a sections property and filling the sections manually here. The structure is the same for pretty much any other template, as you can see, but there is a better way to do this. So let me delete this file, and instead let's go to the online editor over here. Let me go to the home page. So let's click here, and in pages let's click on create template. This will create a page template. If you wanted to create a product template, you will go here and create template, and it will create a product template, and likewise for any of the other resources. But let's focus on page. So let's say here that this will be about us. It will be based on the default page template, but we could also base it in any other existing page template, such as the about us, such as the contact page. But let's create it based on the default one because I want to show you something. And that is this page section over here that was in the default page template and that now comes baked in this one as well. Let's first start adding our sections here. So let's say promotions group, which is the one we created. And let's also add an image banner one. Let's move this one at the top, well below the page one, and let's save. And I want to first show you that here we have contact, even though the name of this template is about us. If you check the preview path over here, you see that we are previewing pages contact, so we are previewing the contact page. We haven't created the about us page, so this is why. Once we create it, we can change this URL manually to about us if we want to. And also, you may notice that here we cannot remove this page section over here, but the other ones we can. So remove section for image banner is available, and for promotions group it is available as well. So why is this? Well, we'll have to pull these changes locally to check the JSON template that was created, and that will help us understand why this is happening. Okay, so here in the code, let's run Shopify theme pull. Let's pass the development flag and the environment flag set to development as well. And this will pull the latest changes that we made a moment ago. We can see here this page about us template that we created. And we can see that the first section we have is this main page section. Now, this has a name because we based this template in page.json, which is the default page template, and here it has main instead of generated ID, and that's why it also has main here instead of a generated ID like the other ones. However, this doesn't explain why we cannot remove it. But if we go to main page, I know this is main page.liquid because of this type over here. So if I go to main page.liquid, and if we go to the bottom here, we see that something is missing. We see that the presets property is missing. So let's go to the section that we created a moment ago, promotions group. And over here we have presets, and here we don't. And I told you when we were creating this section that we need this presets property for it to show in the online editor. So if I try to add here, now let's see the name of this section. So main page.name, main page. The name of this section in English will be just page. So if I look here for page, Okay, so here we are getting this page result, even though we just said a moment ago that by not having a presets property, it wouldn't show here. And the reason for this showing here is because there are two different sections, main page in done. That is unfortunate for this example, but let's go ahead and see why. But just to show you that these are two different sections, take a look at the settings. This one has all of these settings and this one at the top does not. And if we want to see why, that shows two different sections with the same name in end of the folder schema.json. If we look for name page, we see here the first one is main page, which is the one that is showing here at the top without a presets property. It has padding top and padding bottom. Here we have top padding and bottom padding. And then we see here below that we have the page section, which is also named page. And if we look for page.liquid, this is a section and it has presets, and this is why it is showing in the online editor. But anyways, as this one, as main page.liquid doesn't have a presets property, we are adding it manually in this page about us.json. And by adding it manually here, it will show, but it will not let us neither remove it nor place it anywhere else. Let's see, can I replace it? Yes, I can replace it. I can place it anywhere else in the page, but I cannot remove it. So it will always be here. But if you really want to remove it, you can use this hide button over here. By pressing it, you hide the section. It is still in the page, but it is not visible anymore. So you can save it and you won't see it. Now from Shopify admin, let's quickly create the About Us page. Here, let's say About Us. Let's save it. And here I can assign it a template. But you see that we only see the default page and the contact page template. And the reason for this is because we have not pushed these changes. We have to push them to the live theme for the templates to actually show here. Now we could do this in this case because I'm the only developer working on this store, but in a real store you will not want to be pushing templates that are a work in progress. So how do we debug them, or how do we view them? Well, let's here in localhost, if I wanted to view the About Us template, what I can do is use this query parameter view equals and the name of the template, so About Us. And now I'm viewing the About Us template, and any change that I make here in the online editor, so for example, image banner change, if I save this, and I refresh this page, I see here image banner change. So as long as I'm using this view parameter, it will work fine. Now, how do I view the About Us page in the online editor? Because you see that we are actually in the contact page anyways. Well, I can change this contact here in the URL for About Us. It will ask me if I want to leave the site. That's fine. And if I unhide this, I'm in the About Us page. So this works because this is the URL for the About Us page. So if I go back here and I click on Edit Website SEO, I can see that the URL is Pages About Us. So that is why I was able to change it over here to About Us. Now let's quickly see Liquid templates. Unlike JSON templates, those templates allow us to add custom coding down. So as they are a Liquid file, we can add elements in between sections, hard-coded elements in between sections, which we cannot do in a JSON template because this is just a JSON file. It only contains the content of the sections, nothing more. Also, something that Liquid templates do, that JSON templates don't, is that they share the section data across them. So if you want sections to show with the same data across different pages, that is a use case for a Liquid template, something that with a JSON template is not easily possible. You can do so by using meta objects, for example, but that is much more complicated than using a Liquid template. The only thing is that you are restricted to all sections in that template, sharing their content across their different instances in the page. You'll see what I mean in a moment when we create an example. So first, let's create liquid template 1.liquid. And here, let's add some hard-coded HTML. So this is some hard-coded title. And then we can start adding sections by using the section tag. So here I can say section, promotions, group, and I can say section, image banner. Note that these sections are being added in the code, so the merchant will not be able to remove them nor reorder them, even if they have the presets property in them. Let's see how this looks like in the theme editor. Okay, so from the editor here, let's refresh this page. And let's look for liquid. Right, I have to prefix this with page, even though this is a liquid template, to specify that this is a page template. So let's refresh again. And on pages here, I can see liquid template 1. So I see this is a hard-coded title, I see the image banner, and I see the promotions group. And I see here that I have this trash icon, but it doesn't do anything, or it doesn't seem to do anything. So I can't really remove them. And also I cannot reorder them. So this is the constraint of a liquid template, but we'll see another one in a moment. So let's say that the title here, let's change this to liquid template title. Let's save this. And in image banner, let's add a heading, image banner heading, and let's save this. Now let's create another template, another liquid template with the exact same content. So let's do here page liquid template 2.liquid. Let's paste this, and this is some hard-coded title too. Let's put here. And now if I refresh this page, I should be seeing under pages here liquid template 2. And you see here that I have image banner heading and liquid template title, even though I haven't set anything in liquid template 2. And the reason for this is because all liquid templates share the same data across sections. If we do Shopify theme poll, we'll see why in a moment, because as you saw in page about us, the data for this template is stored in the template itself. So that is why I can add the same section in different templates and that won't matter. However, as it is a liquid template, it doesn't store its own data. It stores it in settings data.json over here. So if I scroll here, under sections in this file, I see here image banner. And this is what every liquid template with the image banner section will try to read to get its data. So if I change something here, it will be changed across both liquid template 1 and liquid template 2. So that's the main difference between liquid templates and JSON templates. There are instances where this behavior is exactly what you need, and there are instances where it is not. Usually it is not, and that's why JSON templates are the default when you create a template through the theme editor, but now you know that liquid templates still exist, and if you're working on a legacy theme or in an old theme, it's likely that all the templates you have there, or most of the templates you have there, are liquid templates, because previously these were the only type of templates that were available in Shopify. JSON templates were added relatively recently, about 2 years ago or so. Pretty much does it for the templates directory, the last thing to mention from it is that in some instances we can have subfolders here only in the templates directory for some reason. For example, for customers, the customer templates are inside this customers subfolder. We saw a moment ago that for other folders such as assets, this will throw an error, but Shopify allows it for the templates folder for some reason. Now let's cover the config folder over here, which we already have a preview of. This has a very large JSON with a lot of data that appears to be shared globally. So let's see how this works exactly. Let's start with settings schema.json. And if we see this, we are very quickly going to notice a very similar structure to what we saw a moment ago when creating a section. So if I go to promotions group.liquid, here we see name, and then settings, and a group of settings that look very similar to what we were adding when creating our own section. And it is because these settings are the same type of input settings that we use when creating a section. So this is pretty much the same as we saw a moment ago. Here at the top, we also have this object. This is metadata for the theme. So this is the theme info, this is the theme name, done, the theme version, the theme author, the documentation, and so on. Now, what is the purpose of settings schema.json? Well, it is to have properties that are available globally. So the values of these properties, once we fill them through the theme editor, will be available in all the snippets and sections throughout the page. This can be useful, for example, if you want to share pieces of information in between them. Like, let's say that you are running a promotion in your store and you have multiple sections in the page and multiple snippets that are updated based on what promotion is running. You can have a global setting for this over here, and once you update that, all of your sections and snippets reading from it will be updated at the same time. Also, you can have here other global settings such as your store's logo or even colors. If, for example, you are using some branding in your store and you want to change to a different color for the primary color, you can create a setting for that over here, which is exactly what this one is doing, by the way. And as soon as those values are changed, the colors across the store will be changed as well if they are reading their values from this property. Let's see all of this in action. So in the editor here, to access the settings, we will click here on theme settings, and we see all of these categories for the different type of global settings that we have. These are the global settings for done. So if you're using a different theme, you will see different things here, and if you're starting a theme from scratch, you won't see anything if this file is empty. Now let's create a group of settings ourselves. So let's go here to the bottom. We can group these settings, by the way. This is why they are grouped over here. So let's say name, and let's name this as tutorial. By the way, these are using this T syntax for the same reason the other sections that we saw earlier in the video were using it, because DOM is intended to be an international theme, a theme that can be used with multiple languages. So this T stands for translate, and therefore instead of hard coding a word here, it is reading from a JSON in this local JSON to fetch the correct label to put in here depending on the merchant's title. Anyways, here let's say settings, and let's add a simple setting of type text. The label will be promotion, and the ID will be promotion. Keep in mind that IDs must be unique across all of the settings here, so it might be wise to prefix them. For example, promotion name instead of just name. So let's name it this way. Let's save this, and now let's see how this looks like in the editor. So from here, let's refresh this page. And if I see tutorial here, we have promotion, the promotion setting. By the way, note that even though this is the last one over here, it is not the last one over here. The order here does not reflect what we have in settings schema.json. Anyways, let's say that we have 50% discount across the store or something like that. For this to be taken into consideration, you will have to have an actual discount for this, but this is just an example. Anyways, we don't see any change, and this is because we are not reading this setting from anywhere. But let's change that. So let's go to page template, liquid template 1, for example. We can read settings from here. So let's say this is some hard-coded title, and let's say settings dot promotion name. Let's put this here, and if I save it and refresh the page, I'll see over here this promotion. And likewise, I can go to, for example, promotions group, and I can even use an if statement for this. So for example, if settings.promotion name, then let's say the promotion, or let's say active promotion, and let's copy this, let's put it here, and let's save. And now if I refresh the page here, I see active promotion, 15% discount across the store. I see this text over here hard-coded in the template as well. And if I start changing it, for example, let's say 40% instead, we see 40% here, 40% here, and if I save, this is working fine. And if I go to the home page, the text is not here anymore because it was hard-coded in the template itself, but we are going to see it here in the section because we are using it is part of the section. It is not a setting, it is part of the section's code itself. And as we are using an if statement here, if I remove this, let's save. Let's say that if settings.promotion name.size is greater than 0. I think that will fix this, because what we want to avoid is showing that active promotion text there if there is no promotion enabled in the settings. So I think that will do it. Let's see. And there we go. And now, if once again I set a promotion, 15% discount, 50% discount, we see active promotion, 50% discount, so this is working fine. And now let's do a pull here to see where this data is being stored. So here let's run the pull command again. And this will make a change here in settings schema.json, where we will be able to see, in settings data.json, where we will be able to see here the promotion name. We can change this from this JSON directly, or we can change it from the theme editor as we saw a moment ago. All of these settings are global settings, so you have access to all of these properties in any of the files that your theme has. And that pretty much does it for the config directory. The only one remaining is the locales directory over here. As you can see, as you saw throughout this video, this is mainly used for translating settings, but you can also use it for translate text. So the ones that are, for example, el.json, these are used for translating text. The ones that have a schema.json, like for example fr schema.json, these are used for translating settings. fr.json will be used for translating text. We will be seeing more about internationalization and translation in a future video, so I won't cover much of this here. Just know that unless you are working on a multi-language store, you don't have to do much with this directory. And that pretty much does it for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, remember to leave a like and subscribe for more Shopify related content, and I'll see you all in the next video.